Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Casual Stroll Through Lord of the Rings Online. For those of you that are joining in now on Twitch, this is going to be one of our first preview streams for the landscape of Before the Shadow. This episode, we're going to be focusing heavily on taking a tour through Swanfleet. Um, so, to get things started, so for those of you that are new to this stream, my name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards. I am a senior world designer for Lord of the Rings Online and been doing this for basically forever. And we are happy to present to you the kind of first premiere of the best kept secret ever. No one ever knew we were going to be doing this. The best kept secret region ever, Swanfleet. I say that somewhat facetiously. Um, so, again, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the streams, this is a world design focused stream where I'm going to be talking about building the landscape, what goes into building the landscape, how we sculpt the terrain, how we figure out where we put monster camps, those sorts of things. I'm not here to talk about anything regarding game systems, specific content in the area, anything that has to do with lag, PvMP. This is purely world and level design focused. So if you have any questions regarding that, feel free to drop them here in the Twitch stream, and I will happily do my best to answer them for you. Some things I may need to be a little cagey about because we don't want to have spoilers here. Also, I do want to, since there was some comments on here, do want to say there's a certain TV show out there called Rings of Power. Please, please, please avoid discussing that in this stream as well. We don't want to spoil it for anyone either. But otherwise, welcome everyone to Swanfleet. So this is what we've been working on, and don't mind the QA folks in the background there. This is one of our test environments, so I'm running around and in the test environment with our QA folks as they're going through and testing things. So this is something that I've been working on for the better part of a year now, working with some new world design techniques, working with some new methods for generating hype maps that allow us to build what, between this and Cardalon, what is easily probably the single largest landscape addition that we've done in any update. Like pound for pound, size for size, this is probably the largest playable area you will ever find in an update to date. It may become obsolete with things we do in the future, but for right now, this is the biggest. These are the two biggest regions that we've ever introduced. So this is a large amount of landscape. We're looking at something along the lines of probably around 1,500 land blocks worth of space. I probably talked a little bit about land blocks, but they're how we chunk up our landscape. Generally, we try to stick to around like 500 land blocks per region, but between Swanfleet and Cardalon, we tried to push it and see how big and how explorable we can make it. There's very little in Swanfleet and Cardalon that if you were to run from one end to the other, there's very little impassability. A lot of the hills and mountains are sloped enough so that you can actually like climb up them and get to where you want to go. So we're starting here in the town of Mossward. This is where our new beginner experience is going to start. Kind of a small frontier town along the southern borders of Swanfleet, kind of nestled south-ish of the rivers themselves, and kind of in between Enedwaith and the lands to the south, which we have not introduced yet and may introduce in the future, but at the moment, not right now. But it's a simple, quaint little village. Lots of folks in and about, going about their business. When you start the game in Before the Shadow using the new starter experience, you'll start out in a Archet-like private experience, a quick private experience that will like introduce you and tutorialize you through the game, and then you'll be out here into the open world with everyone else. One of the greatest things too that I think with what we're doing with this is, with the original starter experiences, each race, elves, dwarves, hobbits, and men, all had kind of their own starting spots, which was great and flavorful, but it made it hard for people to kind of connect and play together, especially brand new people. So if you were a dwarf and someone wanted to play a Hobbit, one of your friends wanted to play a Hobbit, you'd be fairly separated from each other and would have to like figure out your way to get to them. With this new starter experience, every race can start right here. So if you want to start playing the game from scratch with a friend, you can just come right here, do your Mosswort starter experience, come out into the open world, and meet up with your friends almost immediately. Um, this is a fun little space to build because I haven't built a village like this in a while. I've spent a lot of time on monster camps and other like broader region things. So building a town, building in color is something that like was nice to kind of get back to a little bit. Even doing a couple of little tiny shop interiors as well. I think one of the things that we are trying to do right now in development, we're mostly done. The world team is mostly done, but there are little things here and there where we're trying to go through, add a little bit of color, add in a couple of small social interiors here and there. Excuse me, so that players have spaces that they can hang out in if they want to. Um, so we'll see if I'll get up on a hill so we can take a look down at Moss Ward real briefly. You can see where it's nestled here, and I'll bring up the map for it as well. I got to turn on my UI for that. So we have, so this is Moss Ward here. Very simple village to western Edidwaith. Again, like we like to add in these little like call outs to places that you can't quite get to yet. So you'll see that sort of thing on the map. But here we have Swanfleet. Which I think these maps are gorgeous, and I love because they reflect the terrain so much. Like what you see is for the most part what the terrain looks like, which I think is a really beautiful reflection of the hard work that we put into the landscape. So real quick, I'm going to, while we look over Moss Ward, I'm going to take a look and see if we have any questions here and see what I can do to answer them. So, Good Bjorning asks, are we allowed to say if missions are part of Before the Shadow, and will there be other pieces of content like epic battles, skirmishes, etc.? So missions are a part of it, but you will also get an awesome questing experience. You're going to get epic story that will basically take you from 1 through 30. Effectively where the original epic story brings you up to Rivendell, this story will do the same. There will be a couple of instances involved. I'd encourage you to take a look at the info sheet on our website about all the features of the expansion pack. There's usually more detail that can be had there. So when I was talking about size, Murphy asked if the size I was talking about was Swanfleet and Cardalon together or just Swanfleet. Swanfleet and Cardalon together. Usually when we're talking about these things, since we're developing them both at the same time and releasing them at the same time, we're kind of treating them as one giant update. Swanfleet is the smaller of the two regions. Cardalon is larger, but there's both still very substantial areas. Talarian says, "Can you show where the new regions will be on the Middle Earth map?" Sure. So we have here, we haven't updated this map yet, but Swanfleet and Cardalon kind of eats into this portion of landscape here. We've updated the Breland maps, Loneland maps, Trollshaws, Eregion, and Edidwaith maps to all reflect their new connections to here. And there will be some new map markers here to indicate major POIs, much like how Breetown has a major POI as well. North Mirkwood and Erebor was probably the single largest update prior to this. Yep. So let's go down through. So what does it mean you get to start? You get to select a character create. What do you mean that you get to select in character creation where you'll start? That is the plan. Once you've purchased Before the Shadow, when you create a new character, you'll have the option to use the classic starter experience or this new starter experience. All right, a couple more. Read down through here real quick. I know you guys have a lot of questions, but we've also got a lot of ground to cover. Shadow Skill says, by the way, it looks like there's no boat ship transport on the map. We do not have any boat masters or dock masters in before the Shadow at the moment. For both Swanfleet or further west in the Brandywine, we haven't done any updates for that. That'll come in a later update. We're at a point now where we're hitting what we call string lock, so it's really hard for us to add new text to the game without our localization person getting a little upset with us. She won't get it. They won't get upset, but yeah, we're trying to be aware of localization and whatnot. So we're at the point now where adding new things gets a little bit more difficult to us, and we have to consider what we add in our next update instead. So how Desmordo asks, how long did it take to make that the landscape? So I started working on this back last fall, but the actual like sculpting and whatnot didn't really start happening until February. There was a accident in the height map that resulted in some of it being visible near from Enedwaith back in the spring. And those were the very, very, very early days of this update. It's progressed a lot since then. We've come a very far away. But the bones of what was discovered back in the spring are very much still here. One of the nice things that we introduced as part of this update is there's some new rock sets that we've added. So you can see these here. These are some of our new rocks. They're not, like looking at them, it's like, oh, more rocks. But it's always nice to have new shapes and forms that we can play with in order to better like cultivate a look and feel, and to give everyone a break from the same like shapes and forms that we had previously. So we have those ones that are here on the ground. We also have these cliff rocks here in the distance. And one of the great things too about the introduction of these things is it kind of, with working with our tech art team, we introduced some new material effects that allow us to better scale up things like rocks without the textures getting too blurry or too stretchy. Elgalin Idrendir asks, will the storyline be playable for those who are who the overlevel wish to experience the introduction as well? I believe you will be able to play everything except for that initial starter tutorial instance. Because that's something that is specific to the brand new players, but any player should be able to, as long as they have purchased an access to it, be able to pick up the story right after the end of that tutorial instance. Ruvio asks, why is your character half transparent? My character is an admin character, and he's currently cloaked. This allows me to still see where I am, but does not allow any others to see me. Other players won't be able to see me, and other enemies won't be able to see me. Not that they would actually attack me, because my character is level 140 and they are not. So Hapa Joel says, Cardalon borders the Brandywine. Will we see any South Farthing with Beyond the Shadow, or will that be another project? There's no South Farthing as part of Beyond the Shadow. We did do some distant landscape work in order to just make it look nice. But much like people observed with Swanfleet, what is there now can and very will likely change once we decide to build that region. So here we are in one of the first store villages of the expansion pack. This is Klager, and I'm sure our content folks are yelling at me for how I'm pronouncing this, but quaint little village. A little bit of farming here, and it's nestled right up against these waterfalls. So of course we have a mill, a water mill, and some fishing going on here as well. And do not mind the floating assets. Again, this is a beta space, so there are a lot of things like this here, which is a bug, which will get resolved as we continue on in our development. You know, I'm usually dedicating at least 1 day a week, if not two, to just solid bug crushing. Um, so Doko Male asks, to satisfy my curiosity, are there any real life places that were unique enough to fit in and to make it into the map itself, from buildings to part of the map itself? So there aren't any. I don't think we were really inspired by any real world locations for Swanfleet in particular, because Swanfleet's kind of a like it's a border territory, so it's a little bit of Eregion, a little bit of Enedwaith, a little bit of Cardolan, you know, so it's kind of character is just kind of this melting pot. It's a convergence, you know, much like the deltas, which we'll get to, where all the rivers combine. Like Swanfleet itself is very much a combined region where it takes influence from the things that are around it, at least as far from the construction perspective. So similar to some of the things we had done in Gundabad, one of the things that when we were building this, we were playing a little bit with verticality here. You know, particularly where it bordered up against Enedwaith, where the elevation of Enedwaith, particularly the Gloom Glens, is very extreme in comparison to the lowlands of the Delta lands. So we had to play a little bit with the verticality. Who doesn't love good waterfalls? So that's one of the things that we when we were building it we wanted to really like emphasize is and one of the things that these cliff faces really helped with is the like selling the look and feel of the verticality of the space um, when it needed to have the verticality. All right, we're going to take a look at some other things. Wandering Pro asks, do you guys use mega scans? No, we do not. Our textures are not that that high quality. And I'm not entirely sure how well our engine would support that sort of thing, because those are some impressively large textures. Uh, so Good Bjorning asked, is it confirmed if Sean Bean will be returning to the role for voice acting and character modeling? So we do not have the rights to the Lord of the Rings movies or the character likenesses. And so any character from the Fellowship of the Ring, the Lord of the Rings books, The Hobbit, any characters that are in there are based off of the books and not off the movies. So we don't use the movie voice actors, the movie likenesses. There's certainly a degree with anything that we've built, certainly a degree of familiarity we try to hit when we're making these things. But because we don't have the rights to it, we can't just outright duplicate it. So we'll stop here in the village of Lintrev real quick. This is another small farming village with one of what I think is like the one of the most impressive views of the entire region, but we'll get to that shortly. It's sure to be a favorite screenshot spot. Those of you that are familiar with Enedwaith will be interested to see how this region connects. So here we are coming into Enedwaith very shortly. And now we're in more Tulhow, the Hobbit village in Gloomglens. So you can see these areas just border right up against each other. One of the things that was really important for us was trying to make sure that things were connected, but connected in as safe of a way as possible. You know, we don't want very low level players to have too poor of an experience when they are exploring, but sometimes you may wander into higher level areas, and we try to be as cautious and as generous as we can be in those areas when it comes to stumbling across them. So here we are. We're coming up on this view. And now we have basically a view of all of, or almost all of Swanfleet from up here. Druid's Fire asks, is there a nice balance between wide open areas and towns, villages, stuff to do, not like Dora Marth or even parts of Yonashire that are super empty and you're riding for days to get to quest areas? So I can't speak specifically to the moment-to-moment content density. We did try to make sure that there was a good spread of things like monster camps throughout the space, that quest hubs and whatnot were kind of well spread out throughout everything. Let's do this real quick. Give you guys the awesome sunset view while I go through some of these questions. Brunderberg asks, are there any homesteads for this territory? There are no homesteads currently planned for Before the Shadow. We do have thoughts and plans for what we want to do for our next homestead, but with this update, homestead is not coming available. Let's see, go down through. So Shadow Skill says, speaking verticality, I really hope it's not going to be new troll shaws with labyrinths of valleys and hills. You don't have to worry about that at all. With a few exceptions here and there, pretty much everything within the region is traversable. There are some things, like I believe, here in the middle of the screen, you can see these mountains. That's a cliff face that you can't climb up. But to the south of that, you can find your way up to it, no problem. No, you can't reach that tower in Mortalhu Ionar. That is currently still behind impassability. Are there any plans to possibly extend the draw distance? Would really shine. So it's stuff that we've talked about. I know there have been engineers in the past that have tinkered on that sort of thing, but I can't say specifically as to, say like when or if those sorts of things would happen. It would definitely be great to be able to push things out further. Though we do tend to build our day files with a certain fog range in mind. So even extending the view may not necessarily help unless we also then update day files. And particularly if it's a feature that the players have control over, that gets more complicated even more quickly. So we know the entire expansion offers leveling from 1 to 32, but each of the two regions have specific level brackets. Yeah, I think in general, Swanfleet will probably comprise the first third to a half of the experience, and then Cardalon will handle the other half. So Narufan says, does the change the time of day for everyone on the test server? No, it does not. There are other commands I can do that would change the time of day for everyone else on the test server, but because we have QA folks on here running around testing things, I don't want to mess with their experience all too much. So everything that I'm doing to change the time of day is purely on my side of things. Let's see. Show us the great road that connects to Enidwaith with Swanfleet. I'll be heading there very shortly. There's one more little village that I want to get to, and then I'll make my way over to the old South Road, which is what the Greenway becomes when it crosses through Tharbad. Is there a different workload when doing the map and places like a mini expansion or full expansion? From Hoya Bella. It really depends on what we're focusing on and what we're building for the expansion. In this case, there was a lot of world work, but I was fortunate to be able to, we were fortunate to be able to kind of go off and build for months before the content team needed to get in to do any work, which is kind of the precedent that I'm hoping we can establish for ourselves going forward, for what we want to produce next year as well. I think we have big ambitions for next year, from the world perspective. I think we're going to be producing a lot of landscape. So hopefully we'll be able to land everything. Stick the landing. All right. Thurlar says, "Did we see swans yet? There are swans in Swanfleet. We just have not gotten down to the river for them yet." Um, Eros 216 says, "Have you included stable points that connect Breland, Eregion, and Enedwaith?" So there are stable points that will connect Swanfleet and Cardolan to their surrounding regions and vice versa. But there are no like full like horse travel routes that take you from like Breland to Enedwaith, for example. No long slow routes. So here we are in the Hobbit village of Glen Hillig. So this was an opportunity for us to do something a little different for hobbits. We don't usually have cliff dwelling hobbits anywhere, so I thought this would be a great place to just kind of play around and do something that is different for hobbits. Just hopefully, when they're in the tavern, they don't stumble out too drunk and then find themselves at the bottom of a waterfall. Druid's Fire. So next week we will be doing a stream of Cardolan. So you won't have to wait very long to see what everything looks like. We're trying to divvy this up. I've barely done a third of the map right now, and we're already halfway through this stream. So I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. But let's get out of the water here, and we'll start heading towards the South Road. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat as much as I can. I know there's a lot of hype and a lot of interest about this and a lot of questions that people have. So hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions while still kind of fast tracking us through the different spaces. So there in the distance, up on that hill there, you can see a brigand camp or a bandit camp. I actually have a bug in there where the poor bandits don't have any sleeping bags to sleep on in their tents. So once that is freed up from our mission designers, I'll be able to go back in there and put down some tents for them. So everyone deserves sleep. Uh, Manad Lair says, "Are the hobbits in the new area basically Welsh, like the ones in the Gloomgens?" So yeah, these hobbits are all stores. So we've introduced 3 new store hobbit villages for players to visit. 2 of them will have taverns for kind of socializing and whatnot. Like I said earlier, we're kind of getting down to the wire. So things like adding in new text increases the difficulty in us doing that because we don't want to overwhelm our localization folks. So here we are on the eastern reaches of the Great East Road. So when you cross over from Cardolan at Tharbad, the road changes from the Greenway to the Old South Road. One of the things I wanted to do was make sure that there was like a from carryover from Enedwaith. I really liked this tiled road. So the road from Tharbad into Enedwaith all uses this tiled roadway. And it goes up into the mountains here and then comes down into the spaces that you're familiar with in Enedwaith. You can see up there. I won't run all the way up because that is a very, very long run, but here we go. So now we're going to turn a little bit and head towards the north and west, get ourselves down into the actual delta, so you can see some of that and maybe see some of the new fauna that we've introduced. We added in a bunch of new waterfowl, a bunch of new water birds. So there's herons, there's egrets, there's storks. We brought back the swans, so they find their way into Swanfleet as well. It wouldn't be called Swanfleet without the swans. And I'm running into a rock. So one of the other, how I was talking about Swanfleet is kind of like a melting pot, a combination of a bunch of different things. One of the other major story hooks for Swanfleet is a village of Dunlendings, kind of coming up here to make their own way of life. So we do have a Dunlending village, and this village here kind of serves as the major town services anchor for Swanfleet. So after you complete Moss Ward, you're still going to be fairly low level. So the services and whatnot that you would typically need from a major hub didn't really make sense to go into there. So here in the Wadewater in Langarav, I believe, Langaran, um, you'll be able to find all of the town services, all of your class trainers, auction house, banker, all of your crafting services. Now there are no superior crafting. There's no superior crafting in this town because it is a low level town. But most of your other services you'll be able to find here otherwise. So this is kind of your good like central point. So you can see where I am here on the map. We're here in the kind of in right smack dab in the middle of the region. All right, let's hit the water. See if we can't find us some waterfowl somewhere. Here we go. Bunch of birds hanging out. These are some of our new critters for the region. Our friends, the moss lurkers or bog lurkers, walking around. So here we are in the Delta now. One of the things that we wanted to make sure when we were building it, we wanted to absolutely make sure that the likelihood of getting dismounted as you are, hello swans, the likelihood of getting dismounted as you are going through the water is very, very low. I think we tried to make sure that everywhere you went where there was water, you weren't just going to get kicked off your horse. Which is another thing to talk about too is, you know, very early on, you will have access to a mount. Part of why we wanted to do that was just because it felt like it helped streamline the new user experience, but also because like these are large regions and it feels important that since these regions are so large that you'd be able to kind of traverse them a little bit more effectively. There, so Thuralore says, "How many swans are there in the region? There is a fleet of them." But so I'm a dad. I can make those jokes. Oh, another thing too. I forgot to mention it because my voice is starting to go a little bit on me. If you haven't seen me take a drink of water or take a drink of ginger ale recently, please remind me in chat so that I can stop and have a drink, because I could talk all day about this sort of thing, and talking a lot ends up with me not drinking anything. So I absolutely like whenever I run around in this region, I am just like I'm sorry if I'm a little quiet. I just like I really love the work that we did here. I think the new tools. Oh, by the way, so there was a question in here about larger creatures and whatnot. We have our Avanks here, kind of representing the large river beasts. Um, you know, whenever we do planning for monsters in a region, we always try to make sure that we have a variety of silhouettes represented so that it's visually kind of like interesting and you're not just seeing the same forms and shapes everywhere you go. So M. Murphy says there used to be nice transitions of water to land on shores, but they're gone now. What happened to those? That's something that we were actually talking about recently, and I believe there are some properties in water files that we may need to just take a look at, and it's something that I can sit down with our tech artists to kind of figure out. Because yeah, I've noticed that has gone away too in some spots, and I want to see if we can try to bring that back without causing too many problems for the existing water types that would have that soft edge. Let's see. Going down through the list here. So is there new music? Yes. From Cursa 1066. Yes, there will be a plethora of new music for this and Cardalon. Bill Champagne has been knocking it out of the park with it. He's been sending us kind of previews of his tracks every so often, and they're great. Like I can't say enough good things about the music that he produces for this and the other game. Um, so Thurlor says he doesn't also seem to be in max graphics mode. There's no wakes in the water. When I am cloaked, I don't make those splashes in the dynamic water. That's another way to stay hidden. Um, So Shadow Skill says, right now the zones seem very lightly populated by monsters. I would say like Lonelands or the Shire. Are there some elite hard sectors in Swanfleet or Cardalon with high mob density? So we're trying to keep the higher mob densities to the monster camps. So the monster camps, which we haven't really like gone into any of them here, because I don't want to spoil. I don't want to go into hyper detail and show everything about the region. I've been just kind of like aimlessly meandering around, going and looking at cool spots. But I have not gone into very many monster camps. In part because like I do want to leave some things for you all to explore and discover and experience on your own, whether that's playing on Bullroar when this becomes available on Bullroar, or playing it yourself when you are actually on the live worlds with this. So we're trying to balance like a preview versus full detail like walkthrough. For regions that like have already been released, I'm a little bit more comfortable going into those like spaces in higher detail. But since this has not been released yet, we're gonna stay like light on the like heavy exploration. I don't remember where it is up here, but up here on this hill is Cariskelebrin. This is the here we'll just rocket jump up. This is the ruined elf city of old, um, with the ring forge off in the distance there. Um, so this is a more monster heavy thing. So one thing to note too is because my character is level 140 and these monsters are all level 14, they don't show up on my radar. So I wouldn't be able to really show off the density of creatures in here anyways because I'm too high level for it. Maybe for Cardalon I can do the tour with a lower level character, and that'll be a little bit more. Um, I can make things a little bit more visible to everyone. Um, so can we get so? Uh, let's see a couple. Let's go down through some more questions. I thought I had seen one somewhere that just scrolled past that I scrolled past. All right. So Good Bjorning says, I've got an important question I've been trying to get a reply for years. Oh, this is for damage and whatnot. This is a world design focused stream, so I'm not going to be answering any questions regarding content or game systems or lag or monster play or engineering or anything like that because I'm not the appropriate person to ask those questions to. Um, so all of the maps in the areas surrounding Swanfleet and Cardalon will be updated to the new style of map. So if you are the kind of person that prefers the old style of map and would like to have those maps for nostalgia's sake, I recommend finding and capturing those images so that you have them to reference, as they will be replaced with the new versions when this is released. So Bright Life Community asks, do you have a personal favorite between the two zones? I think Swanfleet is my personal favorite. Like this is my baby. This is a region that like I have probably poured the most into, because I was still trying to figure out. Part of it was I was figuring out the new process by which that we're going to be developing our landscape, figuring out how the tools interact and whatnot. So there was a lot more like love and care. Well, there's a lot of love and care at Carlon as well, but a lot of more like attention to process and like nitty gritty, like figuring it out as I went along here compared to Carlon. So here we're checking out the access point from Eregion into Swanfleet. Some of you might remember that this used to be an impassable cliff here. No longer is it impassable. You can see the ring forge down there. This is still going to be closed off and used for epic story purposes. It's not to say there may not be other skirmishes and whatnot that could happen there in the future, or other instances that could happen there in the future, but I know there has been a request in the past to make this like an open public space, and that is not happening with Before the Shadow. So yeah, so back to what I was saying. I think Swanfleet for me is my favorite of the two, just because like it's the first one we started working on. It's the first one that kind of really used our new pipeline for generating landscape from start to finish, and there are just some parts of it that I absolutely love. And parts of it honestly that like kind of feel like home to me, um, as far as like areas where I grew up and the kinds of like places I remember exploring as a kid. Granted, not as fantastical, but there are like little things here and there. Um, there was a question I remember seeing earlier on in regards to Easter eggs, and there are a couple of small Easter eggs hidden throughout Swanfleet, at least, and those are not places I'm going to go to in the stream. I don't want to spoil those, but they're like fun little hidden things. The Fallen Angels asks, "Are there any elves in Swanfleet or Cardolan, or is it more Hobbit and human?" So I would say Swanfleet is heavily store and elf, with a bit of Dunlending focused in terms of like the cultures that exist here, and Cardolan is more human folk. So here we are at one of the last quest hubs in the region. This is the furthest north one, and it kind of covers the camps and content north of here. So as I was talking about things that just kind of like feel like home to me, one of my favorite bits about the region is like this little stream here. Like it feels like lush. It feels like a real place to me, because I remember streams like this that had like heavy reeds and bushes on the side. And I think as we work to kind of refine and build our landscapes and figure out like what looks good, what doesn't look good, like we come up with these little like tricks that help a space feel more, more alive and more real. And I think little things like that, having the reeds and the bushes encroaching on the edge of the water, really help to sell it as an actual real space. What do we? Oh, get this region. I think that was from when I entered Oregon. All right, we're gonna go down through. Well, let me get up to these ruins up here, and then I'll go down through some more questions. So GM2 Falcon says, "I noticed a complete lack of lanterns or any and sort of path decoration compared to other areas." So I think part of it is there's this very like clear, sharp path that we're trying to follow. Also, like Swanfleet in particular, but also Cardolan is kind of a like they're abandoned territories. They're not places that really like people would inhabit normally in great amounts, such that things like that are necessary for them. So let's get through there. Yep. We'll take a view out from here. You can see the angle from here as well. So I remember back when the angle first came out, and people were like, "Well, why can't you just like build this little part here that connects to Eregion, and then it can be we can explore from here to Eregion without cliffs and whatnot. And the when they were talking about that, like internally, I'm just like, oh, just you wait. Like we're planning on it. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. It's just not yet. Uh, Papa Joel says, I like seeing these borders to old areas. Those transitions are really cool. Yeah, and I think with one of the things that I am most excited about and most proud of with Swanfleet and Carlon both is how they open up the world. They open up to Eriador in a way that is just so. It just makes everything feel so much bigger. And so even up here, you can run. Um, you can keep running north if you want to, and you can eventually get to, I think, Damgalar in the, or Glen. Nah, I'm not even remembering the right names. Uh, Again. Get up to here to Gwingris. Sorry. So yeah, you can see the new Eregion map as well. It's really nice to be able to see like the details in the terrain um, from so high up, and it makes it look and feel like an actual space, which is I love. I know the landscape or the maps are not to everyone's taste. Like some people prefer the more cartographic ones. Personally, I find these much more helpful than the cartographic ones, even though they have kind of a bit less character in comparison. Let's see. Generic question about Easter eggs. Are you aware of any undiscovered Easter eggs from past old content? Um, we know things about the bear house in Eastfold and the rabbit in the cave. Do you know of any other Easter eggs that you've not yet discovered? I mean, I would not be entirely shocked if there were little things here and there that people have kind of like put in to amuse and entertain yourself. So you can see Gwingris up there, and you can just hop down from here and continue on to Gwingris. Though you want to be careful because if you go too far, you'll run into level 48 creatures. Let's see a couple more questions, and then I'll start heading to the west. So Bright Light Community asks, how long does it take to fully develop a zone like Swanfleet? So development of a zone usually has a bunch of different phases to it. Um, so for building Swanfleet, the new process that we use, I got a first pass height map done over the course of a few days. A combination of world building tools, of application called World Machine to generate some height maps for us. Photoshop, believe it or not, I use Photoshop pretty extensively in building a terrain. You bring a grayscale height map in, and then you can edit it through there to build out what you want. So that can take a few days to build out, but the bulk of our production time is really in the detailing, getting the scene files in, terrain painting, setting up the water so it looks right, setting up the day files. So like Swanfleet was probably 4 months of my time purely dedicated to it. Um, not focusing on or working on anything else but Swanfleet. Um, so that's a good amount of time. It's one of those. I remember having meetings with Renidian, and he's just like, "This task that you have in your queue, build Swanfleet. It's been in your queue for 3 months. Can we move it along?" He's like, "But I'm still building Swanfleet." So these things do not just happen quickly or overnight. It does take us a good amount of time to build them. My hope and goal is that I can help our team refine our processes and find places where we can, expedite where our processes are to help still produce these high quality landscapes, but produce them in a way that is a little bit more time efficient for us. Can we see the view of the River Gorge again? Let's go up here and we will take a look up to the north. So yeah, I do love the interconnectivity here. Like being able to go from the Trollshaws to Swanfleet to Eregion just opens things up insanely. And excuse me, Carnarvon is no different. So there we can. So technically, I guess I'm in the angle now because our land blocks are only so small. Good Bjorning asks, will the river hobbits have usable boats or craftable boats even? Will grafting return to the game in future content? So boats do not feature into any of what we're building here. And while the stores are NPCs, they are not being introduced as a playable character race either. I know that's something that's been kind of discussed and talked about in the past, and that's not something that I can really speak to in terms of when or if it'll happen. Let's rocket jump up here to get another good view. Apologies to any of our QA folk that might have been down there and just saw an explosion happen. Let's run up here. So some of the things that, like I said, I've intentionally, like in this preview, I'm not really trying to give you all a very like detailed view of this region. I want to leave enough to kind of entice you to come in and play Boror, to come in and play it when it goes live, and discover things for yourself. Let's see. So the Soft Snake GR says the blue skybox is the one from West Gondor. So it's the colors might be slightly different, but I definitely really appreciated the wispy clouds that were in the West Gondor day file, and I wanted to like find an opportunity to use them again. And I felt like both Swanfleet and Carnarvon being as like broad and wide open spaces as they are, it felt like this was a good place to use them. Ruvia asks, hey, what drew you to work in LOTRO to begin with, and what do you personally like about the books and lore? Essentially, why do you love Lord of the Rings? So what drew me to work on it was basically, so when this was being produced by Turbine, I was working on a project called Asheron's Call, and we had a West Coast studio that was set up to work on Asheron's Call, and I decided LA life was not for me, and I wanted to come back to the East Coast. And what was available as an opportunity was to join the world design team for Lord of the Rings. So I happily jumped on that. It was a new opportunity. It kind of let me dive into design, which is something that I wanted to do because I was previously art director and lead artist. So being able to make that transition was something that I was really excited about. As far as what I like about Lord of the Rings itself, I think there is a like depth of history built around it that is really hard to match in a lot of other content out there, and it helps make the world, as you're reading it in books, as you're experiencing it in movies, and as you're playing it in games, it helps all of that feel just kind of like richer and more real. And also, who doesn't love hobbits? Like, hobbits are amazing. So Blue Skybox fits Gondor because Gondor is like Mediterranean's landscape. Why would Eriador landscape supposed to reflect England? So I don't think these types of clouds particularly are really limited to any specific region. Like I grew up in northern New England in the United States, and we'd have these bright blue skies like this. We would have these kinds of wispy clouds as well. I think too, it was important when building these skyboxes. You'll notice in this view that we have here, it's kind of leaning a little towards purple, and it felt important to, considering the history of um, Swanfleet, to make it feel a little magical and to make it feel like a little forlorn and a little sad, which I think this kind of like dim blue purple in the fog and in the sky helps to kind of sell that story. You know, the sky is a character just like the landscape is a character, and it's important to, you know, tell a story through the sky just as it is important to tell a story through the landscape. Um, I think the kinds of clouds that we're using in here are really kind of reflective of the wide open environment. I think that, I think the big old fluffy clouds, they look great, but they tell a little bit of a different story too. So I'll hop over here. I'm gonna give you all a little bit of a view of the distance of Cardelon. So we've got the Horwell here, connecting with the Guathalo, or connecting and becoming the Guathalo down to the south. So let's go down through and check a couple more questions before we wrap this up. Let's see, I might have missed some stuff. So let's see. Exiled 1989 says, "This looks beautiful. Do you have any info on lag and server stability?" Again, this is not the stream to ask those kinds of questions. I'm more than happy to talk about landscape, but server performance is not something you want me to be talking on, because I will either be wrong, or I will just not have information to give you. So, um, Shadow Scale. Oh, AC is like an ancient MMO. It is one of the progenitors of the 3D MMO experience. It's what I cut my teeth on when I started playing MMOs. It is what I cut my teeth on when I started working in video games. And the engine that Lord of the Rings runs on, like, it is the great grandchild of the engine that Asheron's Call was running on. So there is a lot to that game that both Lotro and just MMOs in general kind of like owe to their existence. And it's often not really thought about much or given much credit, because I think a lot of people tend to think like MMOs, started with WoW, or MMOs started with EverQuest, but there are other games out there that contributed just as much to the history of this genre. All right. Carissa 1066 says, "As a world designer, do you design the story of the area and the cultures of the people in the area?" So we do something called region personality research. So the one of our world designers, he will go through and spend a month or so, whenever we're doing something big like this, a month or so, uh, researching the world that we are going to be exploring, researching the landscape, finding everything he can possibly find about what's in here, from cultures to the kinds of foliage to the kinds of fauna, and compiling that all into one great big document that we use to kind of direct us as we're building out things. So um, there's a lot of research involved. Uh, Bright Life Community asks, anyone else to pump to play these zones? Well, I definitely am. Like, I remember last year when we launched Gundabad and we launched the Brawler, and everyone was like, "Oh, we should play the Brawler. Can't we?" And I was like, "I want to play the Brawler, but I want to wait." Like, in my own head, I'm like, "I want to play the Brawler, but I'm gonna wait until we launch this, so that I have a brand new experience to run myself through, because I've done the Shire before, I've done Breland before. I want something new, and that's what this is an opportunity for." Let's see. Hubbard says, "Will the new areas be where the new skirmish instance, etc., take place?" So the skirmish has its foundations in Swanfleet, and the instance has its foundations in Carlon. We're not going to take a look at either of them now, because my time here is basically up. So I'm going to do a quick run through some questions, and then we'll sign off. So Mistin 1K says, when was the idea for this area first planned? Is the next zone? It is the next to the zones that were in the game since the beginning. So these areas were part of one of our 16 years worth of pitches that we had done a year and a half or so ago, maybe 2 years ago. And while what these zones became was not exactly what we had pitched, they still had a featured prominence in that. So these were places that we thought would be fun to get to at some point. We'd like to get to them at some point. And then the opportunity to do this new user experience that we're doing kind of just made sense to introduce them. Let's see. Lauren Toll says, really pleased to see more new low-level areas. Will more maps get filled in as time goes by? I mean, I think that's what we hope for. I think we're excited to just keep filling in the maps as often as we can when it makes sense for us to do so. Any way to slightly up the density of copper nodes? It doesn't need to be every 10 feet like Rushik Bog, but it's annoying to start a new metalsmith or armsman sometimes. There's no real simple way to do that because a lot of those controls are land block by land block. We also don't want to have every land block have something in them. We do want to have a little bit of effort required to gather some of those resources. The specifics of the reasons why is something that's better suited for a game systems designer to answer than for me. And let's see. Was mainly curious as to the size of the map in pixels. I don't have that specific metric handy off the top of my head to answer that. Will this area have epic storylines for new low-level characters? Yes, it will. You will be able to take yourself through a brand new set of epic stories that will eventually lead into the epic stories in Rivendell. And what's the biggest Bright Light Community says, what's the biggest misunderstanding that we non-devs have about developing a zone like this? So we'll finish up on this question. I think there is often a misunderstanding about how much effort something that might seem like a simple thing actually takes. So as a recent example, when we launched the Yondershire, there was a portion of landscape that didn't get added in kind of between the Binbull Wood and Yondershire that didn't get included. We had thought we might like to do it, but the amount of time we had in our schedule just didn't allow it. And there were a lot of players that really were just like, well, can't you just tear down the walls and make it go? And we could do that, but that doesn't make it a quality experience. That doesn't make it a fun and enjoyable experience. So what may seem like a simple fix is not necessarily always a simple fix. And it's sometimes hard to explain and express that when, the view from outside is just like, well, you just tear down a wall. And there's always something more to it than just tearing down a wall. But anyways, so thank you so much, everyone, for attending this preview stream. I'm excited to show off Swanfleet. This, like I said, this is my baby and one of my favorite regions to have made so far. I've had a lot of fun making it, and I'm glad that I was able to share it with you all today. Like I said, it's the best kept secret of 2022. So again, thank you, everyone. We'll be back here next week because I'm going to do the Cardelon stream. So I'm actually going to start heading down towards Tharbad, which is where we'll start our Cardelon preview. So that's what we're going to be doing next week to give you guys a taste of that region as well. For those of you that haven't been in game lately, be sure to check it out. There's lots of events going on. And we also just announced our newest free quest feature. So if you have not yet gone and gotten that code for yourself, please make sure you check out the website or any number of various social media outlets, and you can find the code, type it in. And if you haven't gotten your free quests already, you can get them now. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. I had a lot of fun showing this off, and thank you for all your questions. I hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy for those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, enjoy the beginning of our autumn season. So have a great day, and I'll see you guys all next week.